Good morning. Sometimes it's hard just to be silent, isn't it? But I do love it. Yeah, I do too. Yesterday, I did something don't ask me why, I don't normally do it, but I went outside and just sat with my coffee. And I got so intrigued by listening to nature, because nature sings to you if you listen. I got so intrigued by that, my coffee got cold. And when I came in, I looked down at my cup and I brought it in with me. And this morning when I was getting ready to leave, I saw that cup of coffee still sitting there by the coffee maker. I never did drink my coffee yesterday because I was so intrigued by the sounds. I even took a little audio of it because I heard something and I sent the audio to somebody and I said, now, if you just get rid of the traffic and those dogs and those other dogs that are barking and the wind, and there's a bunch of birds, and then there's some more birds, and then you can hear the wind chimes, then listen further than that, because that's what I was actually taping for the person to listen. And I realized I just had this symphony of sound. And I realized that it was all prayer. And if you just listen and let that guide you, your whole life is a prayer, can be a prayer. I started coming to Unity a while back. It took me a while, but I finally got that. I finally understood what I was reading in the books, and I'd come and listen to Margaret and the guest speakers speak, and they'd talk, and I'd listen. But I didn't always get it. This is the first time, that Reverend Margaret actually sat here and listened to me talk. I asked her if she would go downstairs to the other room. But usually she didn't. But anyway, I listened to those. I listened to Susan Bowles. Susan Bowles she had these long arms, and she would bring her arms up and she would just talk about this flow and getting into that flow. That, when you get there, where you feel that flow with the source energy, that's when you know it, you get it. And when you get it once, you want more of that. Or I did. I do. I'm not always there, but I know that it's there, and I know that I can tap into that. Thanks. Forgot to move forward. Oh, she did. Let's get away from that one. So Karen Drucker has a song. I'm not going to sing this for you. But these are the words. God is my source. Well, no, I'm not going to do it. God is my power. God gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for the blessings. And then God gives me everything I need. She just sings this over and over and over again. Some unities sing this as their offertory song. It's really beautiful. Oh, now I've got two back there. That's where it is. I'm going to use my notes so I don't get nervous. When I first began my path for the LUT, I chose pastoral care because, well, your choices are adult education, children and youth, music, administration, and pastoral care. pastoral care includes prayer. If you don't know this about me, this is something I do. If I begin to sweat over something, then I know that I need to look into that further because I'm not comfortable with it. And if I feel fear over something and there's no danger, I need to look at that. And that's how I looked at prayer. I still sweat over it a little bit, but I'm working on that. We're all a work in progress. With prayer, there's so many ways to pray. That meditation that we had, that was a silent prayer. And if it feels good to you, then that's what you need to do, however you pray. Some people pray to Jesus, some people pray to Mary, some people pray directly. They say God, they say source. They have all different names, and however you pray, and you're comfortable with that, that's good for you. I know Charles Fillmore used to say before he would go into meditation that he was going to headquarters. Like I said, it's all prayer, and that was comfortable for him. When I was brought up believing that you had to put your hands together in the universal symbol of prayer. You had to kneel down. You had to bow your head. You had to close your eyes. You had to supplicate yourself. Unity doesn't teach that type of prayer. That type of prayer, I was taught that I was praying to a God that lived out there somewhere. Unity teaches that God is within us. So we pray to that God that resides within us. Oops, I'm going backwards. Myrtle Fillmore, I'm sure if y'all have been around Unity very long, you've heard the story how Myrtle went to a talk, and the main thing she got out of that talk was, I'm a child of God and I do not inherit sickness. But then she turned around and realized that she had this potential for divine healing through the use of affirmative prayer. That's something that Unity is based on, affirmative prayer using affirmations and denials. Now, when I pray, I like to have a conversation. It's kind of like talking to myself, but I like to talk things out because I may think I know what I want. I may think that I'm in that flow, but I'm not necessarily when I begin. It's kind of like the other night we had a Crucial Conversations practice class. We broke up into pairs, and they have this 5-step process to go through to really get to the meat of the matter. Well, that's kind of what I do when I talk out my prayers. I talk them out, and I'll finally get to the meat of the matter and realize along the way that half of what I'm really saying in the beginning isn't truly what I need, because I'm not in the flow of the source, because I've come from a need instead of going to God. Oops. To pray, like I said, we don't have to get down on our knees, fold our hands, close our eyes, supplicate ourselves. We merely have to be conscious of our thoughts, that source is within us. And when we're conscious of that and we pay attention, we can change those old thought processes that we have in our head. And when we change those, we can change our lives. We have the capability within us. When I was sitting out there yesterday morning, I was also thinking about Elizabeth Kane. She came a couple months ago, and her talk was Holy Ground. So I'm going to say something, and I want you to understand it's not my ego talking, so just kind of listen. God resides in me as me, and therefore I am God. God is everywhere. God resides in me as me. I am the expression of God. And I'm not referring to this body so much as the spirit that resides within me. So wherever I am, God is. So wherever I walk, that's holy ground. Hope I'm making sense here, because I really want you to know it's not the ego. That's not where I'm coming from.
Well, it was far, so.
Right. So when I speak of the source, that is my understanding of oneness. Okay? So when I come from that space, the spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. That oneness that we are. Now, we're going to do some eye gazing now. So I just want you to turn. I just want you to turn to the person next to you. Take a deep breath and come from that space and say to them, look at them. Look at the person beside you or behind you and say to them, the spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. I have to say, I don't always look at everybody like that. I try to remember that. But if I'm not conscious in that moment, when I look at somebody, I first see the body. And if I do that, then that's where judgment comes in, with me anyway. But if I look deeper, if I take that second look, and I come from a space of love, if I tap into that source, then I'll see it. I'll make that connection with someone. Sorry, I know there's a hole there. And so my spirit in me will recognize the spirit in you. And you make that connection. By knowing that God dwells in me, I also know that my entire life can be a prayer. I can live on a prayer. In Friday's prayer practice class, we're going to use this book, The Gathering. He has 9 steps. It's a book on prayer. You go over the 9 steps, and then he has a 40-day prayer practice. It's written by Reverend Jim Rosemurgy. He's a retired minister. He was in Fort Myers, I think, was his last church that he retired from last year. I have have to say, when I first started reading the book, you pushed a few buttons because I had some beliefs. But I really liked the very first step. It took me a while to get beyond that first step, and I had to read that first chapter a few times, but you have to release your human need. And when he talks, he does all of the steps in affirmations. He's a unity minister, talking about prayer. So if I look back at the way I was brought up to supplicate when I prayed, asking a God out there, basically begging God, because honestly that's how I prayed. God, I need this. God, I really want that boy to like me. God, I really need this job, or whatever. And I would also, I'm sure y'all didn't do this, but I bargained. Well, if you would let me do this, I'll do this. I never did a lot of that, but I did bargain when I was praying. These are all needs. I was coming at my prayer, coming to God from a need. And if you come from a need, you come from a lack, a space of lack. Okay? If you begin your day in the space of lack, what are you going to get? Awesome. So there's something that Unity teaches. It's thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So if I've got those thoughts of lack, what am I going to produce? More lack. This took me a while to get in my head. This is another one of those things that Susan would just, she was very kind though. She didn't hit me over the head, but she did keep telling me over and over and over again. I like this, and this is one of the, I had to read this a couple times. The hard truth is, God does not fulfill our needs, these needs that we're asking for. God, I need that job. God, I need that boyfriend or whatever. God, whatever God is doing, God is always doing. Okay? Spirit doesn't rest. Here's another quote from, these are quotes from Jim Roseberry. The way we look at needs, then asking God to fix it, this leads to disillusionment. I don't know about you, but separation, yes. How many times did you ask God for something? Well, maybe you didn't pray like that, but how many times did I ask God for something and then I wouldn't receive it? Well, where was God? Right? Well, that was me talking. Why didn't God provide that? I said all I had to do was ask. Well, I was asking. Where is God? And then one day I realized that God is still there. God never moved. I did. Which brings you to what Paula said, separation from the source. This is a long quote. He says in the book, we continue to insist that a need is an avenue for God's power, and it's not. Rather than insist that God work through our needs, it's best for us to discover the avenue through which God's power and presence can be expressed. Joel Goldsmith said something very similar. when he was asked the question, what can God do? He said, God is doing. God is always doing. God's being our source. And when we become aware of God as our source, our needs are met. That is when our needs will be met, when we realize that God is our source. I know I just said that, but I feel like I have to say it again. So let's say you need a job. You don't pray for a specific job. You pray to open yourself to the experience of God as your source. Even I'm rereading this book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, he even says the same thing in there. In chapter 11, Paramahansa Yogananda, he talks about opening yourself to experience God as your source. When you focus on the need, you're focusing on something small, okay? Instead of the everything that you are. Whereas, instead, if you need to turn, what you need to do is turn from the need and turn to God. But having the need will turn you to God. For example, I'll tell you a little story, a quick little story. This is 30-some years ago. I was looking for a job. I was without a job. I was unemployed. And we were living on 3rd Avenue in Myrtle Beach, and I was outside. I want to say I was mowing the yard, but I never do that. So I don't know. I was doing something. I was out in the yard with my mother. And this family friend drove by, and he stopped and he just pulled up, and we were talking, and he said, I don't know, I just felt like I saw y'all out here, and I felt like I needed to stop and say, hey. Well, as we were talking, Mom said to him, if you hear of any jobs, she's looking for a job. He goes, oh, I've got the best job for you. Well, I went and applied, and I retired from that job 30 years later. But I feel like, even though I didn't know those words, being in the flow and tapping into source, I didn't come up with those words until I started coming to unity. That's where I was. I wasn't really concerned. I was actively doing. I was applying for jobs, but I was applying for all kinds of jobs. I really didn't have it in my mind that I had to have a specific job. I applied for waitress jobs, front desk clerk, even working in a kitchen. I always wanted to be a chef. That didn't work out. And I think that job led me to stand right here in front of you today.
Amen to that, absolutely.
It seems random, but I was in the flow. I was, and when you get into that, it doesn't mean that you stop doing. You have to keep doing, but you open yourself to possibilities. Now, Jim gives another example. It's called The Wick and the Candle. Have you ever heard this story? Oh, good. So he has a candle, and it has a wick, and he gets a lighter, and he lights the wick, okay? And for some reason, when I was doing this, I want to do it today, I want to blow that candle out. But we'll just put it aside. So then he gets another candle, but there's no wick in it. He tries to light it, and you can't light it. No matter what you do, you can't light the candle because there's not a wick in it. He says, you've got the candle, it's got all the fuel, but you can't light it. You were created to be the wick in God's candle. this isn't the body. Okay? Your wick, the wick is actually a person who is aware of God's presence in their life. You know, Reverend Margaret, what does Reverend Margaret say to us every Sunday?
You are the light of the world.
Okay? You're the wick. Once you light that up, you can't go backwards. You can't. You're the light of the world, and your wick has been lit. Reverend Jim, now this is just chapter 1. I'm not going to go through all the others, thank goodness. We'll have to do it on Friday. So Reverend Jim ends with this, and this is kind of long, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. I am aware that the one central need in my life is to know God. This belief is the need of which Jesus spoke about. Spirit knows we need to be aware of it. When this awareness occurs, Spirit then has an avenue through which to do its work. There are no needs in God. So I must not bring the need to God. However, I do experience needs, and they have a role to play in my life. They turn me to God. Once the turn begins, I leave the need behind and bring only myself to God, as well as my deep desire to experience all that God is. So you have to release your human need and bring instead yourself and a desire to awaken to the presence of God. This brings me back to what I was talking to earlier about consciousness. You have to be conscious. Conscious of your thoughts. I'm talking about that, starting that day with lack. You don't want to do that. Conscious of the source that's within you. You just have to tap into that. I'm going to give you one more example. I love to create. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I never thought of myself as an artist. Okay? I love to do all things creative. You should see my art studio, which I've just started calling that. Remember what I told you about earlier? That fear when I start sweating about something, I realize I need to look at that closer. Well, that's how I was about using the word artist in conjunction with me. As I was finishing up the LUT program back earlier in the year, I decided I wanted to do something for myself. I wanted to explore that fear of being an artist. Once I started looking on the internet and found all these classes, and they were real expensive, and I thought, I'm not going to focus on those, but I'm just going to open myself and something will come. The perfect class will come. It was late at night. I was getting ready to turn off my computer, and you know how when you get an email it goes ding? Honestly, my computer dinged. And I opened up the email, and there was an email from a lady in Saluda that has an art store. Somebody had canceled, and there was one space open for the class in acrylic Mixed media, which is exactly what I had been looking for. I called a friend of mine the next day. I emailed Jane up in Saluda. Within just a few hours, I had the whole class planned, paid for. It was a lot less than the one that I had been looking at. Because I feel like I had tapped into that source. I let it go. I let go of the outcome. This, let's see, I have it here, was my first painting. You can't really see it good. That's not a good picture. But I brought it.
And it's for sale.
No, it's not. This is my first painting that I did in class, and I was so proud of this painting. I thought it was phenomenal. I couldn't wait to get home because I wanted to paint. Okay? So I'm going to leave this up here. You can look at it. But the cool thing is, 7 weeks later to the day, I sold my first painting.
That's what I want. I know. Not my friend.
So I want to end with this. When you turn to God, when you're aware of those conscious thoughts, and you're aware of the source that dwells in you as you, your entire life is a prayer. You are living on a prayer.